My advice to others is just keep trying things. You will find your passion if you're hungry and curious and you are exposing yourself to lots of different experiences and people and environments. That was true for me, but it wasn't, I want to go across Antarctica, therefore I'm going to do this, this, and this. It was much more organic, and I would lose my way, or I'd get focused on something else. I was way into climbing for a while, and then my attention got grabbed somewhere else some years later. And so it's been a wobbly sort of trajectory, but those different experiences have always added to, I think, the successes that I had found on the ice.
Hello, intrepid listeners, and welcome to the Carpe Diem Live Your Dream podcast. Today's guest is Anne Bancroft, an extraordinary polar explorer with so many incredible firsts. She was the first woman to the North Pole, first woman to both the North and South Poles, the first woman to ski across the Antarctic continent, and the list goes on. And mind you, these aren't journeys by plane or icebreaker or snowmobile. These are all 2 or 3 month expeditions by foot, ski, and dog sled. There's some terrific books out there describing the details of her journeys, including her book, No Horizon is So Far. But if you want a quick peek into the mindset of someone who doesn't mind camping for weeks at a time in minus 70-degree temperatures, listen in to this episode with Anne. Enjoy the show. Anne Bancroft, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me.
I'll tell you, Anne, I have known of you for about 35, 40 years. You and I both grew up in Minnesota. I wish our paths had crossed earlier, but I remember following your North Pole expedition back in the 80s. And your Antarctic ones in the 90s. And I always thought, wow, that woman is so cool. And now I get to talk to you live. This is great. I'm honored.
Well, thank you. Get to know me is what I always say.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to guess you're a different person in the city versus out on the ice, but maybe not.
I'm not sure I'm too different, but I'm just a strange duck, and I have had wonderful, audacious, strange dreams as a kid, and it's brought me fabulous experiences throughout my life. I've been super privileged.
What really impresses me about you, first of all, they're really cool dreams, and you act on them. You see them through, which is amazing. You have quite the roster of achievements. I'm just going to rattle a couple of them off, but first, woman to reach the North Pole. You've been named Woman of the Year by multiple organizations and magazines, first east to west crossing of Greenland. You and Liv Arneson, were you the first women to cross Antarctica on foot?
Yeah, on ski and with sails. Yeah.
On ski and sails. But, when you're
Well,
sailing, you're on skis.
yeah, we are.
Yeah. Yep. You've been named one of history's greatest polar explorers, and you've been all over the poles and the ice caps. Clearly a polar explorer, and we're going to want to talk about some of those expeditions. Just tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to where you're at.
Well, I did have audacious dreams when I was the age of 8 or 10 years old, and that was to cross Antarctica because I had come across a book on my parents' bookshelf, The Endurance, about Ernest Shackleton. We lived in the country. I was already camping, doing those kinds of things. But when I saw those pictures in the middle of the spine of that book, too young to read it, but those magnificent black and white photos, I saw myself in those pictures. That's what I wanted to do. But you just don't, well, at least in my case, and I think this is true for a lot of people, our journeys in life are very, all over the place. I ended up being an elementary school teacher and a high school coach something I've always wanted to do as well. But, I was a long way from the North Pole at that point. I got summers off and I could go into the mountains or go canoeing or kayaking or whatever it was that I was onto at the time. And then we had, winter break and spring break. So those were always opportunities for me to be in the outdoors. And then I'd be back in the classroom. And then I got this opportunity to join Will Steger, Paul Shirky, and the rest of the guys on the Arctic Ocean, and took a year off. But it wasn't as deliberate as you intimated earlier. It was, I was increasing my skills always. I used to say I'm an expert in nothing, but I'm participating in everything, whether it be rock climbing or mountain climbing. I'd backpack, I'd kayak, I'd canoe. I was just hungry for it all. I was winter camping and always working on those skills, but I hadn't yet dog sledded. But it wasn't a linear path. And my advice to others is just keep trying things. You will find your passion if you're hungry and curious and you are exposing yourself to lots of different experiences and people and environments. That was true for me, but it wasn't I want to go across Antarctica, therefore I'm going to do this, this, and this. It was much more organic, and I would lose my way or I'd get focused on something else. I was way into climbing for a while, and then my attention got grabbed somewhere else some years later. And so it's been a wobbly sort of trajectory, but those different experiences have always added to, I think, the successes that I had found on the ice. You don't just go with the direct skill that you were given, that you've been honing, like skiing, for instance, or winter camping, whatever it is. You bring everything with you to the ice and to a big expedition like that. You bring all your experiences teaching and things like that. I mean, the dogs were a lot like my kids. They goof off, they are mischievous, they pout. They've got wild personalities, and you've got to figure it all out. So all of my experiences have lent to the successes that I've had. It's been a fun ride, and
Oh, and you're still riding. We're going to get
I
into
hope
some of
so.
your more recent things, but yeah. I find it fascinating the way you started explaining yourself when you were 8 or 10 and you read Endurance by Ernest Shackleton.
Uh-huh.
And you saw the photos and you said you saw yourself in those pictures. I just reread that book last week, and I too was enamored by the words and the photos. But a 10-year-old seeing themselves in that is remarkable because it's a wooden ship being crushed by the ice as 28 people stand on the ice abandoned in the middle of nowhere. Nobody knows where they are, and you wanted to be there.
No, I told you I was weird.
Yeah, not many 10-year-old kids would be thinking that at the moment.
What I
Go
would
ahead.
say to that is that, yes, I saw the ship being crushed in the ice. But I also saw the men playing soccer on the ice, and
Yeah.
I saw the dogs in the makeshift sort of doggy igloos, and what I exuded from that, I think, as a 10-year-old girl is camaraderie, team, adventure, and certainly the dogs, grabbed me. I'm an animal nut, so
Mm.
and wanting to seek an adventure on a dog team, oh.
Well, that Will Steger expedition to the North Pole in the late 80s, that was really your breakthrough moment for polar exploration, was it not?
Oh, for sure. It was a breakthrough for all of us, and
Yeah.
it's been
Really
really
launched
fun to see where Will has gone with it, where Paul has gone.
where
Richard
you've
Weber, one of
gone.
the Canadian guys, I mean, he's gone to the North Pole across the ice more than any human being on the globe. So we all got launched in different ways, and it's been really fun to support each other and watch each other grow with that as our bedrock. We were just a ragtag bunch of, you know, bunch of people who had a big desire to wanna do this. We were inspired by the early explorers, so the idea of going with not any outside help, with a sextant and your compass and your shadow as your wind direction, to navigate by. That was a unique time for us. It's a thing that we all cherish, when we look back, that was such a unique time with our naivete, just a lot of gumption.
What's amazing to me, Anne, is how little the North Pole and that high Arctic had ever been explored before you all went there. I mean, there had been some mechanized trips to the North Pole supported by airplane cash, food drops or on snowmobiles, things like that. But it wasn't until you all went there that it was a for real confirmed by foot, by dog sled, no support visit to the North Pole. Isn't that right?
Well, almost. In 1968, another Minnesotan, Ralph Plaisted, in 67 he attempted it and then he failed, and then in 68 he reached the North Pole. They were on snow machines, so it was all about the modern technology, which was the skidoo.
Yeah. Look,
And
impressive, but I'm not a motorized kind of guy. Like
right,
I
right.
do things under my own power. It's comparable in some regards, but doing the dog sled ski foot thing is far and away more
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah, it's just something that it's important for me to mark because
Yeah.
I think he did get there, and his story is actually pretty remarkable, partly because I'm not a machine guy either, and
I think find
can't
it harder on a
imagine.
snowmobile than
It would be so much easier. I know it's so much easier to do it by dog team.
yeah.
And
I'm with
me,
you.
I would not wanna tinker with an engine at 70 below. I mean,
And what happens when you can't
those
get it
things don't
started?
work
Yeah.
very well. And they get caught in the ice and, the ice opens up but, it's important, I think, because there are so few in our time period, from Perry to Cook to Plaisted to the Steger expedition, it was a handful of people
Yeah.
attempting this. There's a
Yeah.
rich history, but it's a very difficult place to get to.
Well, nowadays you can get on an icebreaker, and if you have enough money, you can get there in the comfort of a heated cruise ship cabin, right?
That's right, and that's getting more prolific as, global warming is
Well,
taking away the ice. It's
I
getting
found it a little
difficult. Yeah.
sad because literally last week I spoke with a former colleague of mine who just did that trip. Until what, 3, 4 years ago, it was your only option was a Russian icebreaker, but now
Uh-huh.
there's an alternative. And he did that, and I was like, "Really? You can do that?" And I think it'd be so odd to be slogging along week 3, week 4, week 5 with a dog sled and then see this big icebreaker come through.
Yeah, yeah. No, that would be a little disconcerting.
Yeah. But
That's the new age. I think that's going back to why the 8 of us feel so appreciative of the
yeah.
time period in which we embarked on our trip, because it's changed. It's not just changed from global warming. There's more people who have access to the ends of the earth. But that adventure captivated people in such a way that now there's so much going on when I do expeditions, and I now deliberately try and share them, particularly with school children. It's a lot harder to get people's attention because they've maybe already been or they know you can get there. It's just a very, very different time.
Yeah, that North Pole, and I remember this. I was just in college, and it was not unlike watching the Apollo landings, the aura of adventure and unknown. And then when you went off and did Antarctica, and I think that's when you really flourished in the let's share it with kids around the world. And that I think is such a wonderful aspect of your adventures is the way you shared it and you put curriculums around it and you pulled in millions of
Yeah.
kids. You had so many great lessons in that.
it's this is why I think it's so fun to have a wobbly trail, journey to your passion, because I still identify as an educator first before I identify as an adventurer, explorer, whatever. I've just found a way to merge my two passions. I'm like, I can be a teacher outside of the four walls. And that was my epiphany moment.
I'll
And
bet.
then it would be in 90, going across Greenland and then consequently to the South Pole with the all women's trip where we had direct curriculum. For me, it wasn't enough just to go because it was my childhood dream to go to the South Pole or across Antarctica. I had to have a greater purpose
Mm-hmm.
than my own ambition. Those two together give me a fuel, a rocket booster that's like bar none. I couldn't imagine, in retrospect, going across Antarctica for 97 days without 3 million kids, without
Yeah.
that element, because to have a purpose in life really, I don't know, it propels you when you think you cannot any longer. And I had to have the North Pole to understand that, because I didn't go to be the first known woman, that I just wanted to go. And none of us had a purpose other than we just wanted to see if we could do it. And out of all of us, a greater purpose happened, and it just got actualized in different ways. And
So,
that's what's so fun about watching the eight of us and where we all ended up.
and I tell you, that's why I am so honored to be speaking with you now, because I feel like, and this is getting just a little deeply personal, but I've had a full life, lots of great things, worked hard, and I just have this itch for adventure. And I've been doing neat things, but it's for that former, let's see if I can do it. It's kind of that selfish for me. And I keep searching for that higher purpose, greater cause. And I haven't quite found it yet. I haven't figured that one out yet. I mean, I'm
Well,
enjoying what I'm doing.
I would say that I'm guessing that your podcast is a manifestation of that. You're sharing that out. Just like a lot of teachers, you have no knowledge of how that touches people by
Yeah.
sharing people's stories of adventure, probably your own and others. We don't know where that lands, but I would bet that it's motivating other people to their own potential, their own dreams. It may not even be in the out of doors. That's the beauty of these outdoor stories, is they really translate so well to other aspects of life.
You're right. That is why I launched the podcast, the Live Your Dream philosophy that I am trying to, and I'll come back to that in this interview, is what are your words of inspiration for others? So, and you came back from the North Pole and you were hooked. Like, that's it. You're now full on polar explorer, and you did the Greenland ice cap first, and then you launched the all women's ski trip to the South Pole, and
Mhm.
then you and Liv Arneson did the Trans Antarctica by ski sail. You just kept going, right? I mean, you just kept doing these really neat things. Tell us a little bit about the Antarctica South Pole expeditions.
They are totally different environments, as you know, and the only real common denominator is ice and cold. You travel in a different season. I'm in the Antarctic summer, so it's only like 40 below instead of 70 or 80 up in the Arctic when you're in the spring. But it's a landmass, and it's about the size of the United States and Mexico combined. It's enormous. It's a continent covered in ice predominantly. It's a unique place on the globe because it's treaty governed rather than one government. It's a whole host of governments that are signatures to the treaty. It's meant to be the continent of peace, science, and education. It struggles with that doctrine, but there's scientific bases dotted around the continent, but it's mostly this big white ice cap. And because of Shackleton, when I was a kid, his goal was to go across the continent. And that's where I got the idea. And My all-women's expedition was really meant to go across Antarctica. We actually failed in that objective. We ran out of money. We got as far as the South Pole. It was a heartbreaker for me, and I promised myself that once I get out of debt, which took about 7 years, that I would try again. And 7 years after that, I I I still had some crazy gumption, and so at this point, I had heard about Liv Arneson because in 93, 94, she went solo to the South Pole. That was her objective, and she did it beautifully, and I paid attention in the media to her. I said, "I'm going across Antarctica. I'm gonna take 3 million children with me. I'm an educator. This is what I do, and, and I'm gonna travel with one other, and would you be interested in talking about it?" And she's like, "Well, I had such a perfect trip. I hadn't thought about crossing the continent." But she had been ignited. She's an educator as well, a high school teacher, and she had felt the same sort of rumblings after her solo trip when she came back and was the first Norwegian woman to ski solo. She too felt like she wanted to do something with what she felt so privileged to have experienced. And so when I talked about taking kids with me through curriculum, it wasn't me that lured her, or even Antarctica to some extent. It was really this higher purpose, because I think if it was just me, I would have scared her away. But and we've
I
been working together ever since.
The two of you wrote a beautiful book. I literally finished it last night. No Horizon is So Far. Two women and their historic journey across Antarctica. The two of you, you co-author it. You each share your different experiences with that expedition. But I love the way you describe not just the day-to-day challenges and joys out on the ice crossing the continent, but the amount of effort that goes into launching an expedition like that, the logistics, the planning. It blew me away how hard that is to pull something like that off.
It is, and you have to have a really strong vision, because the years of planning and prep can wear you down, and it's mostly trying to find the funds to support that vision. Your dream, your vision has to be really spot on. You've got to really want it.
And I want to ask you to describe a bit a day in the life. And what is it like, the good, the bad, the ugly, pulling a sled across the frozen South? I've never been there. Give me a sense, give our listeners a sense of what it's like out there.
You're going up, number one, and the predominant winds come from the center of the continent, basically the poles, and they drive towards the oceans. Antarctica is this giant island, so it's surrounded by oceans, so the wind is just hurtling down. And when you're on the coast, you get these really ferocious katabatic winds that, when the elevation drops, they just go hurtling down towards the ocean, and it's a force, and it's in your face. So Antarctica has a way of greeting you pretty quickly in all of her sort of glory and power. And you've got to stay calm and just go slow. That I always say, go slow that first week. You just want to try it back on again. You want to get the ice under your feet. You want to acclimate, in a more metaphoric sense, to the enormity of the experience, the enormity of the landscape, the power of this environment. Otherwise, it can just knock you off your feet, and accidents happen. So you just want to go really slow. There are so many aspects of your day that are big. I think what people also assume is that you've got an 8, a 12, or a 14-hour day of pulling.
Hmm.
In the case of particularly women, the sled is, double our body weight. You're leaning over your ski tips, just pushing up, you're going up. And people, one, they assume that it's a flat terrain because the photographs kind of flatten everything out because it's so big and there's so little, there's nothing really Here in our environment, we have trees and mountains and things that give us perspective to what we're looking at. In Antarctica, and the Arctic is like this to a certain extent as well, it is a huge landscape and there's nothing in your way. And so it's very hard to see the undulation, for instance, of the topography.
For your crossing of the continent, roughly how many vertical feet of elevation gain did you have?
Well, we're going from sea level. In our
Yeah,
case, we were starting from the ocean, and you're going up to close to 14,000 feet.
yeah.
And,
But
that's a
it's
gradual acclimation. But when you're pulling a 267-pound sled, I hate to break it down to the exact pound, but
but you do that.
but we do, you feel that incline. And then it's not just the general incline of the elevation that you're gaining over time. There are big valleys and ups and downs. And then there's, of course, it isn't flat in the sense of just everyday travel, too, because there's these, they're called sastrugi, but they're cement hard snowdrifts. And some of them are 6 feet tall, and you got to clamber
Up,
over
down,
them.
up, down, up, down.
Up, down, up, down.
And try to describe what it's like when it's 30, 40 mile an hour winds and, whatever, minus 30, 40 degrees, how you function. How do you set up camp?
Yeah, things are adapted. But when the wind is really hurtling, and this is the windiest continent on the globe, it was not uncommon for Leave and I, for instance, to be on our hands and knees at one corner of the tent, pounding in stakes that are about thigh high into the ice. And we're doing it one corner together. And then we go on our hands and knees because it's too hard to stand and move to the next corner, never letting go of the tent because we only have one tent. So when you're pulling sleds or you're
Oh,
dog sledding in the Arctic, you have a finite amount of things that you can have two of or one of, or
don't
you
lose
can't
your
carry it.
tent.
You cannot lose that tent. And I mean, if it rips apart. So we're super careful. And then you already know that your hands, you got to learn to do a lot of things in mittens, which takes patience. You can be clumsy when you're cold at the end of a 12-hour day. So again, we try and take precautions.
What was the biggest surprise for you when you first went to the North Pole and when you first went to the South Pole? Things you didn't expect.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I would have to say, I would start off by saying, and this is probably true for every expedition, I wasn't sure I could do it. You can be confident, but you're never sure that you're going to measure up. There was so much unknown about the North Pole. I'm only reading old books from the early 1900s. I mean, there was just nothing. And the stakes, you feel like the stakes are high. You've promised this, you've declared this. And so the idea of failure is pretty scary. I think the thing that surprised me from an environmental standpoint was just how beautiful the Arctic was, the Arctic ice. I thought it was kind of a gray, bluish, dull sort of world. Exciting, certainly, but from a visual standpoint. And I saw every color in the rainbow some days, with the ice reflecting and refracting the light through it. In the Arctic, the can be lurched up into these walls of ice, and there's lots of different kinds of ice. Of course, the Inuit knew this and have many names for ice, but to
Hmm.
see it and to see the beauty more majestic than I could have ever imagined really surprised me.
Hmm. Ah. Yeah, that question of can you make it? That's an interesting one. What was the mental fortitude versus physical fortitude requirement? Like, how do you compare the two
Well,
to get through?
every expedition is always more mental.
More mental, right?
Always. Yeah, because
But
you can get yourself ready, you can physically get yourself in the best shape of your life, you can have nutritionalists pointing you to the best technologies in food and nutrition, your gear, all of that stuff you can prepare, and that's super fun. I love doing all of that. That's one of the things I love about camping is packing out. But you also have to get yourself mentally in the space to do it. We talked about it a little bit earlier about just letting yourself have that first week on Antarctica because it's so immense
Hmm.
and there's so much coming at you. Mentally, if you're not in the game, these places can eat you up. You've got to be focused. You've got to be 100% there or things sneak up on you. And, there's nobody to bail you out. So you do have to be fully in the game. I think over time with many expeditions, for me, there's two things that I work on all the time. And one is just because I've been doing this for 40 odd years or most of my life in one iteration or another, doesn't mean I know everything and doesn't mean I can skip a step in preparation. It's the same whether you're doing a week-long trip in the Boundary Waters or up the Grand Teton or whatever, your preparation should be the same. It should be thorough. It should be focused in every realm. And you can't just because you've been around the block and then you've had these successes, can you skip something? Because that's a death knell as well. And I have to work at that because you get kind of rote, right? You're packing
Mm,
out and you're
yeah.
like, yeah, I
A little
got this.
cavalier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I always work at is how do I move my attitude? So if you're having a bad day on Antarctica and the wind is driving down your neck and you're on your 10th 14-hour day, you're exhausted. How do you move that mindset of being so focused on how painful your knees feel to something else? That's an ongoing practice. That's when it's mental. How do you switch the switch to a different narrative to keep yourself going? I think the biggest example on Antarctica for us that exemplifies this for me is we got into a pocket of no wind at all.
Hmm.
And the whole continent was just blowing guns. And one, we need to sail to make up some miles because we're falling behind schedule, as always. And there's just no wind. And it was the first time, and I know you can appreciate this as an outdoor person. Typically you'll take a day off if it's storming and you're forced in the tent. We're sitting in the tent and it's beautiful out. There's no wind to hold us back. Everything is like it's blue sky. It's spectacular.
So
And
you
we're
take a
sitting,
layover day because there's no
yeah,
wind?
there's no wind. And what we realized is we had been in this pocket of no wind and we can't seem to get out of it. Our tech guy back in Minneapolis is telling us that place is blowing like crazy, except where you are. If you can get beyond it, well, getting beyond it is 50 miles. Well, that takes a while when you're pulling a sled and you're not sailing. And we couldn't get out of this pocket for a while. We started to get really depressed. And that sounds kind of dramatic, but when you're 70 days into this and
Running out of food.
you're running out of fuel and food and time,
Yeah.
and it's all starting to cave in on you, and you're sitting in this beautiful environment, and it was counterintuitive to us because
Interesting.
we hadn't really experienced that quite this way before. And the two of us started to goof around spontaneously. It wasn't planned. We got on our sat phone to talk to kids or something. And I don't know, we just started to be silly and we laughed and it broke this. It was like breaking through a frozen lake, and you're underneath the ice. It just changed everything. And we realized, okay, we can't change the wind. Mother Nature's always in command, right? We've always known that. What we can change is how we feel about it. And so
Interesting.
we just shifted totally.
As you explained that getting a little goofy there in the face of what Mother Nature throws you, doesn't it bring you back a little bit to that scene of Shackleton's team playing soccer on the ice?
Yes.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
goes our ship, but okay, let's
Yeah. Score. And like I said earlier, one of the things I'm most impressed about, not just the amazing adventures and accomplishments out in the polar regions, it's what you've done for kids in particular, but the world as well. And so there's the Anne Bancroft Foundation, and then more recently, your Access Water Initiative series. Talk a little bit about those two efforts.
Well, and after my South Pole expedition, I started the foundation, and it was really built. Um, my board was really telling me that I needed to focus on girls and utilize the fact that I was the first woman to cross the ice to both poles, and to use that notoriety not just for kids and kind of get out of the curriculum business, because at that point I didn't have another expedition planned after the South Pole. And they said, you need to be courageous. And I'm like, oh, when anybody says that, what does that mean? And that was really for me to focus less on certainly curriculum, because there's a lot of companies around the US that did great curriculum. What they were saying to me is, you can't be all things to all kids. And you have a platform as the first and only woman to both poles, and you should utilize that to elevate the potential of girls. So then we started the foundation, and that was really a mentor, because I had mentors as I was struggling through school as a kid, navigating being a shy person, and how to enter the world and then live out my dreams and try things. And so that's what the foundation does. We give grants to Minnesota girls to explore things that they might like, because we don't know where that's going to take them. It's really a lovely thing. We're almost 30 years old. I just love it. And that gives me a sense of purpose beyond the ice caps and these other expeditions that I do.
So the foundation, what I really like about it, look, my podcast, it's Carpe Diem, live your dream. And you're really giving these kids an opportunity to live out their dream,
Hmm.
kind of like you did.
Yeah, that's the design is. I feel like I had people who had my back, even though my dreams were offbeat. And that makes a difference. And so that's what we try and do, is just be a hand extended to a girl that might not have an opportunity for whatever reason. There's a myriad of reasons that might be obstacles in their way of just trying things out, seeing where it takes them.
Given what you've done in your life, given the mission of the foundation, what would be your words of inspiration or encouragement to any of our listeners, anybody out there listening with a dream?
Well, I think the explorer's mindset is a good one for everyone in life, no matter what they're pursuing or what age they are. And that is seminally to be curious. What's over the horizon? The curiosity can drive you to lots of different places that you never expected. And, we don't know what's going to touch us in life. We can think we know, but oftentimes it's the unexpected that really grabs us. And so I think, having a sort of a childlike curiosity and gumption, if we can keep that as adults, I think that's a great asset. That's something I'm always trying to keep alive in myself.
And I noticed the way you cast that, you use the words adventure, what's over the horizon, curiosity. You never mention polar exploration, and I get it. Your point is you don't have to be going out to the South Pole to benefit from that curiosity. And it doesn't even have to be anything outdoors or physical, right? It's just, it could be
Oh, yeah.
intellectual, it could be music, it could be anything.
Yep. It is. It is everything. And yet I am uber aware that there's very few people that have aspirations to do what I've done. There's just like, why? Yeah, you're an exception. But I have been so lucky in my life to be able to share my stories of the polar ice caps and beyond, my adventures, because the elements in the story are very familiar for people. The backdrops are different. It's the ice, the wind, those kinds of physicality kinds of things. That's not the connector. That's not the sort of the tendon in the joint. It's the elements of the story that people relate to. But everybody, they pull away their own pieces of their lives to the elements that we're talking about. And that's really, to bring it full circle again, about Shackleton. That's what I saw in those pictures and why I could see myself.
Uh,
Not that I
wow.
wanted to be on a sinking ship. I wanted adventure. I wanted teamwork, camaraderie, and dogs.
That's so discerning and prescient for a kid to see that in those photos.
Yeah.
And to always be pivoting, you then, what, about 10 years ago, launched this Access Water Initiative. You did a source to sea 60-day, 1,700-mile journey down the Ganges. Tell us about that initiative.
I've been working with Lee Varnison since we crossed Antarctica in 2000, and we're kind of like sisters. We did a lot of trips after Antarctica. We went down and kayaked where you're about to head off to in the archipelago. We got special permission back in the day, and that was fabulous and frightening and wonderful all at once. And then we came back up and we did a summer-long kayaking trip on the Great Lakes. Started up at the Witch Tree in northern Minnesota and worked our way down Superior and out to the St. Lawrence Seaway. We had a lot of programmatic elements to it, and it was the beginning of sort of seeding what would then morph into, many years later, the Access Water Initiative. It was such the antithesis of Antarctica. So we've gone from seeing no one for almost 100 days to seeing people almost daily on the
Yeah.
Great Lakes. We weren't quite emotionally ready. I think
Socially exhausting, I'm
we
sure.
were socially exhausted, exactly. So we did that, and then eventually we found that we've always traveled on water. We're both kayakers and canoer. Well, Lee's not a canoer because they don't do that so much in Norway, but and then our Antarctic and our Arctic expeditions, that's just frozen water. So we thought water is such a great vehicle to continue to travel. We couldn't keep going back to the polar regions. We needed to keep moving ourselves interpersonally and exploring new parts of the world. So we created this very ambitious initiative, which we're still in, and that was to have a woman from every continent but Antarctica join us, and we would do the rivers of the globe. So we started with the Ganges, and that was a 2-month journey from the Himalayas to the sea. We were a group of 8 women. Nobody really goes down the Ganges, they go across the Ganges. And they
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
don't see an international group of women, all sizes and colors, going down the river for 2 months and camping under bridges and things like that. But we did that, and it was epic.
I
I
can't
wasn't
believe you pulled
terrified.
that off.
And
Just
either.
like I said, the pivot from what you had been doing to that, again, a massive undertaking to launch that.
And it was in so many ways the antithesis of what we were known for. We
Yeah.
felt like it was a good contiguous sort of step, but you
You
know,
felt like it was so freaking hot out every day.
it's so hot. It was super arduous, but then we had millions of kids with us all over the globe and certainly in India alone. It was fabulous in so many ways, but it was really hard. And it wasn't so much hard for the physical. It had its challenges physically, but we're surrounded with millions of people. I mean, we're camping literally
Yeah.
under bridges and sometimes in the bush, but this is millions of people. And so invariably people would just show up and you're like, where did you come from?
Hard, I can imagine in a lot of different ways, but I think part of what you're saying, Anne, is hard because it really threw you out of your comfort zone. But from that, we all grow, right?
Yeah. It's comfort zone and it's pivoting to a different element of our commitment to share. On the Arctic and the Antarctic, when we were sharing, no sharing happened until we turned on the sat phone or the radio or whatever.
Yeah, it's a little
Or
arm's length for you from the
yeah,
Arctic.
we're not talking to people. We're talking to typically we were, when we would do our daily report on Antarctica, for instance, we're talking into a machine. And then our tech guy would come in the morning and play it back and then put it on the website and broadcast it out in various vehicles. But if we don't want to talk, we nobody can get to us. And then suddenly we're on the Great Lakes or we're on the Ganges and people have access to you and you have access to technology that you didn't have before. And there's a certain level of commitment that I started to learn even on the Antarctic that I would have to give up a certain something to my adventure. And that was that thing that we had on the North Pole or on many of my other trips prior to that was I would just go off in the woods people didn't have sat phones then. And so my parents didn't worry every day. They
Yeah.
waited until you were supposed to come home. And then if you didn't, then they'd worry. My
Yeah.
mom said, she said the Antarctic trip was much more difficult for her to be a bystander to because the world had so much access to us. So she knew more. My mom worried about me more as the technology advanced and the more we started having the ability to share because she's checking in. She said that disrupted I had to check in on you every day, even though I wasn't maybe talking to you. I was checking in with the media to see if you had progressed, and I became a slave to your adventure. I wasn't doing my own adventures.
And now you're right with the hyperconnectivity. It's almost a burden.
It is something I think about a lot. I've given it up for the educational component. Now, I would never change that trajectory, but there are those wistful moments when I think
Yeah.
of the old days where we just disappeared.
Yeah. I still make sure I just disappear sometimes, but
Oh,
it's
me
harder.
too. On my private expeditions, for sure. My private trips.
Yeah.
Yep.
You must have so many dreams left inside of you, and I'm sure you're going to realize a lot more. But what's one of the next big dream adventures you have?
Oh, wow. That's a hard question because I have so many. I just turned 70.
Woo! Congratulations.
Thank you. It is kind of a milepost, but I'm actually excited, but I'm also hyper aware. I drive my family nuts because I say, "Oh, I've only got 10 good years left." And that doesn't mean that I'm going to die in 10 years, but I think I'm aware, having taken care of my parents in their latter years, that what I mean by that is if my health stays the way it is right now, and I'm knocking on wood, there's many things I wanna do, but it's a finite amount of time, whereas when I had the North Pole before me at the age of 29, you don't think about time. You just go from one trip to another and then one
Yeah.
dream to another, and now I'm prioritizing. And I don't mean even on the expedition side. You gotta prioritize because the days trip along, and I'm thinking, "Okay, where am I gonna go for my winter camping solo?"
Oh,
So sometimes they're short trips and just quiet ones that I do, and sometimes they're a little bit larger. And, I've got dreams for the foundation, and I have a wonderful team there, and so we're dreaming good trouble in that sector. So there's so much to do, and I have to be patient and just kinda it's sort of like doing the expedition itself on the ice. It's one foot in front of the other, and it's amazing what gets done when you are sort of purposeful and just keep plotting.
so you named a lot of things and none very specific,
I
and
know.
that's okay because I think you're going to be a very busy woman for the next 10 years or 20 or
Yeah.
25, right?
Yeah. I hope.
And thank you so much for the conversation today. I would have loved this fireside chat all day long.
Well,
If
thank you. You're fun to talk to. It's nice to be with a compatriot.
Well, I wish you the best in all the things you're doing next, and I'll be following in whatever way I can.
Well, thank you so much.
Bye now. Thanks for listening to the Carpe Diem Live Your Dream podcast. If you like the show, there's nothing more valuable to me than you following it and sharing it with others. I drop a new episode every Friday, so tune in again for another great adventure story. And check out the accompanying website, www.gocarpediemnow.com, and then go seize the day and live your dream.